This is going to be about the locus of control. It's such nerd stuff. You're going to hate it. But welcome, Red Pill, Ryan, Mids Watch. You guys remember all this stuff. This one's a bit of a different report than usual. More often than not, it's guys talking about their marriages and that. This one is kind of, it's from a guy named Sorcerer King, who's actually, he's been around longer than me. He was the guy who technically like first taught me, I guess. So this has been way back. I was like, but once you get past a certain point, then you stop just taking content. You actually start dropping your own nuggets of wisdom. And it's neat to see the transition guys make from being a value leech to a value contributor. So in this case, it's some of the psychological concepts that he knew from his previous job and his career. And he talks about your locus control and attribution theory, the psychological basis behind owning your shit. Now, you guys, I'm sure everybody has heard that. Be your best possible self, you know, own your shit, have a locus of control, build frame, and everybody hears these terms, you nod your head and it sounds great and it sounds powerful. Well, it actually does have a psychological basis to it. So this is what's going to kind of get into it. So as always, we'll start with the field report, get into the comments by Jack, and actually another one by a guy who's, again, I don't mention him enough, but he's pretty switched on as well. Ment Orpheus, I believe he calls himself. These guys have been around for years, longer than me. And then after that, I'll give you some final thoughts and we'll move on from there. Perhaps the core message we give guys here on the Married Red Pill is to own your shit. This generally means to take responsibility for your problems and recognize that your well-being and happiness are your responsibility alone. This is the absolute first thing you must do to change your life. Accept that everything is on you. Past that, you must develop a refined ability to understand behavior in others. So when we tell people to own their shit, we are actually asking them to change their locus of control. This is a psychological concept from the 50s that describes what you believe about the cause of events in your life. Those with an external locus of control believe that things just happen to them and that they have no control over the events of their lives. Those with an internal locus of control believe the opposite, that the events in their lives are under their control 100%. While it is convenient to think of external and internal as a dichotomy, it's actually closer to being a continuum or a spectrum and can vary within a person, leading to different balances of locus of control for career, personal relationships, etc. The attribution theory talks about whether we attribute behavior in others to circumstance, or external attribution, or inherent character, which is internal attribution. And this is the difference between she's had a stressful day and she's just a bitch. So what we see on the Married Red Pill, time and time again, is that men turn up here with an external locus of control, laying blame on anyone and everyone but themselves. In order to implement the Married Red Pill, or to make any positive change really, one has to shift away from an external locus of control towards an internal locus of control. And without this, what's the point of lifting, changing your behavior, or pursuing any goals at all? In addition, men tend to have an internal attribution of behavior, at least in response to their wives. She's just a bitch and it's hopeless, we hear them moan. Such men are attributing a bad attitude to their wives instead of recognizing that she's reacting to the situation. The situation that, generally speaking, husbands have created. This concept of AWOL plays here as well, since it purports certain behaviors to an internal attribute placed in advance. Part of the challenge in the Red Pill is to be able to triage the internal, external effectively and respond appropriately. And then to sum it up, personality psychology has talked about this for almost 70 years. You need to own your shit and understand that, generally speaking, you've created the shitty behavior in your wife that you dislike. Ment Orpheus, this is the guy I'm talking about before. I think he was a scientist, to be honest with you. It's been too long. I literally can't remember. But he goes, there exists an interesting tool to avoid these attribution errors called E prime, which amounts to English minus the verb to be in all of its tenses and conjugations. Literally, raison d'être. Just get rid of the d'être. That means to be in French, by the way. This forces one to reconceptualize thoughts and statements in terms of what exists, rather than attributing the abstractions that usually don't exist. For example, my wife is lazy. This suggests that laziness defines her very being, and behaviors arise from this inevitable internal characteristic. Making the claim conform to the E prime by removing the word is forces the speaker to specifically define what he tries to communicate. My wife neglects her agreed upon duties such as washing the dishes and cleaning and taking care of the kids. Restating the issue like this focuses on the underlying problems instead of introducing a new problem, an all-encompassing label that will surely become the focus of an unwinnable argument. On a personal level, thinking in E prime keeps one from shifting the locus of control off of some abstraction instead of within yourself where it belongs. Note, I wrote this post in E prime. And then Jack chimes in, dude, I love this. For my own writing, I try to be very selective when using E prime statements. This can be powerful and direct and should be used sparingly. The weakest posts in the Married Red Pill will generally be those filled with E prime statements, yet not backed by more than just a subconscious sense of intuition, if even that. Which is why so many of my comments involve an E prime statement that is heavily emphasized, and then a bunch of extra sentences explaining why I'm taking this stance. Note, this comment was also written in E prime, except for the sentence I bolded. If you want any more meta, you'd cut yourself on my edge.
I know I need to live for me, but somebody needs to tell me how to do that.
So now that you've seen all this, what's the takeaway? Honestly, I like it because this is kind of where the concepts the Married Red Pill have been working on of frame, of dread, of the mental point of origin, they all started to really take a shift towards a more refined, specific, and beneficial tone. Because most guys started off fairly angry. There's been a lot of anger over years. And the problem with it is, and this is where we learned about identity and why identity is the issue. And you'll notice that the work has spawned so much different thought. Like in my book on frame, Praxeology, Volume 1, you're going to see where I talk about identity and how putting the identity before the effort is not a good thing. It's basically spawned from this kind of thing. And so you got to think about this. If you're in a struggling marriage, sexless marriage, or a harpy wife, or, she's pregnant, you're not sure you're able to handle it. She is a bitch. She is doing this. Feminists are doing this. Once you add that is statement, you turn it from an issue with behavior into an issue about identity. And the problem with identity is humans treat it like a fight or flight response. If I say you are something, there's no way you can be anything else. And so you adopt that personality and then you will fight hard for it. A good example for this, and for a lot of guys who love intelligent conversation, from a former smart guy, let me tell you how it works. So when I was a kid, they gave me the IQ test. They found out I was gifted. They're like, oh, you're so smart. My mom said I was smart. My teacher said I was smart. They put me in a special smart class with a bunch of other smart guys. We got to play with all kinds of fancy stuff, played instruments, whatever. Now, notice the E prime statement there. I am smart. I am intelligent. Everybody loves this. I am logical. That M and that is doing so much heavy lifting. Here's the problem with that. If somebody tells you you're smart as an identity, you start acting as if you're smart with an identity. Now, what do smart people do? Well, typical to any narcissistic fantasy, you create these symbols. And in the case for smart guys, things should be coming effortless to you. You automatically know everything. You know exactly what you're doing. Now, what happens when you run into something that's maybe too complex for you, takes a little bit of work to master, is something you don't automatically and intuitively understand? Well, the identity takes over. That E prime statement takes over. No, I am smart. Now, if this is hard for me to understand, that means I'm not smart. Therefore, I can either accept I am not smart, again, attribution error, or I can just, not put any effort into it. Well, if I tried, I could understand it, but I didn't really care that much. And guys will start making excuses for their behavior and using that to reinforce the identity instead of getting better at the things you're trying to improve. This is why I cannot think of a more insulting statement to me than when people tell me that I'm smart or that the work is intelligent and shit like that, because it's like you're basically asking somebody to be lazy. Now think about that. And think about how many other situations where somebody has provided a to be or an identity marker onto something you are. There's racial ones, you are a black man, you are Hispanic, you are this, you are that. There's sexual ones. There's like intelligence-based ones. There's all kinds of them out there. There's ideological ones. You are a Democrat. You are a Republican. I've seen so many Americans, they defend some of the ridiculous, most horrific stuff ever because they've decided I'm part of this team, that E prime, that attribution error. And then they fight so hard to protect the is in the statement, they don't decide to look at something from how does this benefit me? What behavior is it I'm trying to change? And honestly, it's one of those things that I enjoy about the red pill because most guys come here because their sex life's in the shitter. My wife won't sleep with me, or single guys, I can't get laid. It's always something like that. And then they come here and you learn your various mental models, you learn your tools, you start to deal with your sex life and you sort it out. And then what guys find out is I came here to get laid and I left with the keys to my own self-actualization. And that's the best bait and switch for men that's ever existed in history. And I love to see it when it works. And it happens so rarely, I cheerlead it every chance I get. So for the end of this one, just keep in mind, get rid of the identity markers, focus on the behavior. And as soon as you don't use these narcissistic identity markers to build your own fuel, to create your own illusions, you're going to make far better progress, not just in your sex life, not just in your marriage, but in your workplace, in your, whatever content you consume, everything. It really is one of the first steps to building yourself a proper frame. So enjoy yourselves. I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Cheers.